For 3 years, Moscow called the south a fortress, an untouchable safe zone, a shield no enemy could breach. But at 2:14 a.m., radar screens from Rostov to Krasnodar lit up with an impossible picture. Not one target, not 10, 249. A flood of Ukrainian drones, followed by cruise missiles, filling the sky like a swarm of locusts. Their targets weren't random oil depots. They were hunting the crown jewels of Russia's Air Force, the laser aircraft, the next-gen radar labs, the strategic backbone of the state. In Moscow, the question was always, what happens if the shield fails? On November 25th, in just 12 minutes, they got their answer. The first minutes of the attack exposed a problem Russia was never prepared to face. Its layered defenses, S-300s, S-400s, Pantsirs, and EW units stretching across the Rostov-Krasnodar corridor, were built to stop isolated threats. They were not built for volume. And they were completely unprepared for 249 simultaneous drone tracks entering from multiple axes. Russian operators watched their screens flood with returns. Some were real drones, some were decoys. Some were nothing more than reflected clutter bouncing off low coastal clouds. But with that many signals inside the radar picture, the distinction didn't matter. Their job wasn't to analyze, it was to engage. Battery after battery opened fire, first in sequence, then all at once. S-400 launchers depleted missiles in seconds. Pantsir crews were firing faster than their tracking radars could update. Electronic warfare units near Yeysk and Primorsko-Akhtarsk pushed their jamming to maximum output, but the spectrum was already saturated. The bubble didn't blind the drones. It blinded the operators. That chaos is exactly what Ukraine wanted. The drone wave didn't need to break through every line. It only needed to overload the decision-making loop. Too many targets, too little time, too many gaps opening between systems that were supposed to overlap. And for the first time since the war began, Russia's safe zone behaved like something far more vulnerable, a patchwork of defenses trying to fight a threat faster than they could compute. Within 8 minutes, Ukraine achieved what its planners had designed the mission to do: turn Russia's strongest air defense network into a battlefield jammed with noise, empty launch tubes, and slow-moving radar filters. The real strike, the part that actually mattered, was now free to move toward Taganrog. As Russia's defenses fought to regain control, the second phase of Ukraine's operation began to unfold in the one direction Moscow never expected: straight toward Taganrog, home of the Beriev aviation plant and its most sensitive aircraft prototypes. Russia's radar grid along the Sea of Azov collapsed into fragmentation. Filters designed to separate close-range clutter from long-range threats were overwhelmed. Search radars near Yeysk began cycling in and out of coherence, unable to provide a stable track file for the interceptors still online. That sudden blindness opened something far more dangerous than a gap. It created a corridor. This was the moment Ukraine was waiting for. From the southwest, a group of drones broke off from the main swarm. Their flight path was direct, low, and uncompromising. A straight line to the industrial perimeter of Taganrog. Russian air defense crews realized what was happening only after the drones had already crossed the coastline. Pantsir units at the port attempted to re-engage, but their launchers were running dry from the earlier volleys. EW units, already at full power, could not extend their jamming field without collapsing their own network. Ukraine wasn't trying to create a massive breach across the whole front. It needed one pathway, one clean route for the strike package aimed at Beriev's aircraft hangars. The moment that corridor opened, the priority drones pushed through it with direct intent. They carried simple warheads, but their purpose wasn't small. Their purpose was to reach the factories housing Russia's airborne-early-warning projects: the A-100LL radar testbed, the rare A-60 laser aircraft, and the support facilities for Russia's future AWACS modernization. The safe zone was no longer safe. Taganrog's air defense network, long considered one of the most secure in southern Russia, was forced into a reactive posture, firing late, firing blind, and firing with only a fraction of its missiles remaining. The approach path was open, and the strike on Russia's most valuable aviation assets was seconds from impact. When the drones broke into Taganrog's airspace, Russia's air defense crews finally understood the scale of the threat, not because of what they saw, but because of what they could no longer see. The radars at Taganrog's airbase were designed to detect high-speed aircraft and ballistic trajectories. They were not designed to track dozens of slow, low-altitude drones, arriving after the entire region had emptied its interceptors. Operators inside the Beriev Security Command watched their screens populate with intermittent, unstable returns, targets appearing for half a second and vanishing again as the system tried to rebuild its picture through a wall of residual jamming. By the time a stable track appeared, the drones were already over the industrial perimeter. Security footage later confirmed the sequence. The first wave hit the outer fuel depot. Small explosions, but enough to force responders away from the main structures. The distraction worked. The second wave went straight for the aircraft shelters. These drones were not powerful, but they didn't have to be. They only had to reach the right door. 2 unmanned aircraft struck the southern hangar where Russia stores its A-100LL radar testbed during off-cycle maintenance. Another impacted the adjacent structure known to house the A-60 laser aircraft, one of only 2 ever built. The payloads were small, but the vulnerability was structural. The facilities were never hardened against direct hits. Local Russian officials confirmed fires inside the complex within minutes. Emergency crews attempted to contain the spread, but internal communications from Taganrog later admitted the truth. Equipment inside both buildings suffered significant thermal damage. For the first time in the war, Ukraine reached deep enough into Russia to strike the heart of its airborne early warning development. Not a front-line unit, not a fuel convoy, but the factory responsible for the aircraft that guide Russia's air command across the entire southern theater. Taganrog burned for over an hour. By dawn, Russia's most protected aviation site had suffered the kind of hit the Kremlin always insisted was impossible. The shield had cracked, and Ukraine had shown it could reach the tools Russia relies on to control the sky. The impact on Taganrog was only the beginning. Within minutes, the strike expanded across the southern coastline, hitting infrastructure Russia considers essential to both its military posture and its economy. As emergency crews in Taganrog scrambled to contain the fires at Beriev, a second wave of drones reached the Black Sea corridor. The targets were not symbolic, they were operational. Near Tuapse, drones struck storage tanks feeding the region's refinery lines. The explosions were limited but precise, forcing operators to cut pressure across multiple segments and shut down part of the distribution system. Within the same window, additional drones reached Novorossiysk, where Russia maintains one of its most important deep-water export hubs. Local authorities reported fires at auxiliary fuel facilities. Satellite imagery later showed a plume of smoke drifting over the port, not catastrophic, but disruptive enough to halt operations for hours and trigger immediate inspections across the entire network. And then came the most damaging blow to Russia's defenses. Amid the confusion, air defense personnel south of Novorossiysk lost one of their S-400 batteries. Ukrainian drones identified the radar position after it went active during the first wave. With interceptors depleted and tracking radars saturated, the battery was exposed. Footage confirmed direct strikes on the radar unit and several launchers, effectively disabling the system. For the southern military district, that loss mattered. The S-400 site covered a key segment of Russia's Black Sea approaches and provided early warning for aircraft routes servicing Crimea and Krasnodar. Losing it removed an entire layer of the region's defensive structure. By sunrise, the scale of the operation was clear. 4 critical points across Russia's southern flank had been hit in one coordinated sequence. The Beriev aerospace plant at Taganrog, fuel infrastructure at Tuapse, port facilities at Novorossiysk, and a functioning S-400 battery guarding the Black Sea. None of the targets were random. All were selected to strain Russia's military readiness, slow its aviation programs, and force resources away from the front. The night began with a drone swarm overwhelming defenses. It ended with Russia's strategic depth exposed in multiple directions. By sunrise, the physical fires across Taganrog, Tuapse, and Novorossiysk were no longer the story. The real impact was what those fires took away from Russia's future. For Moscow's defense industry, this strike wasn't a one-night setback. It was the loss of momentum that can't be rebuilt quickly. Russia's airborne-early-warning modernization program, already years behind schedule, now faces an even deeper freeze. Engineers depend on continuous flight testing to refine radar software, sensor fusion, and data link integration. With test platforms offline, that pipeline collapses. Every month without testing becomes another year of delay. In practical terms, Russia loses something vital: the ability to expand its long-range radar coverage over the Black Sea, the Caucasus, and southern Ukraine. It will now operate with a detection gap it cannot close in the near term. A single night achieved what sanctions and battlefield attrition could not. It disrupted programs that require specialized equipment, rare materials, and decades of accumulated expertise. Replacing those capabilities is not a matter of money. It requires time. Time Russia no longer has. Software teams must rebuild test data from scratch. Manufacturing schedules must be rewritten. Supply lines for high-end avionics must be revalidated. And design bureaus must pause active development to assess losses. This is the kind of slowdown that ripples across an entire sector. Meanwhile, the temporary shutdowns at Tuapse and Novorossiysk forced Russia to reroute fuel logistics across the southern military district. Even brief interruptions put pressure on ground forces operating hundreds of miles away, tightening an already stretched supply chain. The biggest consequence of the strike is not the damage visible on satellite images. It is the shift in strategic reality. Ukraine demonstrated that it can hit the core of Russia's military ecosystem, not at the front, not at depots near the border, but deep inside the industrial infrastructure that shapes Russia's future capabilities. And Moscow now faces a truth it cannot avoid. The systems it relies on to command the air, supply its fleet, and modernize its forces are no longer protected by distance. This was not simply a breach. It was a recalibration of what Russia can expect to defend, and what Ukraine can now reach. The strike on Taganrog, Tuapse, and Novorossiysk was not just a demonstration of range or technology. It was a demonstration of reach, and reach changes everything. For Ukraine, this operation confirmed a new strategic reality. When Russia concentrates critical assets deep inside its own territory, distance no longer guarantees safety. Whether it is an advanced radar program, a logistics hub, or a naval supply line, these targets are no longer off-limits. For Russia, the implications are harder. Every high-value system placed hundreds of miles from the front must now be defended as if it were sitting on the front line. That forces a redistribution of air defenses, radar batteries, and electronic warfare units across a country already stretched thin. And there is a cost to that redistribution. Every S-3 ODRI or S-4 ORAD system, pulled back to protect industrial sites, leaves gaps along the battlefield. Every radar moved inland reduces coverage where Russian forces rely on it most. It becomes a trade Russia cannot win: protect the factories or protect the front. The broader geopolitical effect is equally significant. This operation sends a message far beyond the region, that Ukraine can strike with precision, coordination, and strategic intent, even under heavy electronic pressure. As Russia recalibrates its defenses, one fact remains clear. The war is entering a phase where industrial infrastructure and technological assets matter as much as territory. And in that phase, the ability to hit deep and hit selectively may shape the outcome more than any single battle along the front. The night Ukraine slipped past one of Russia's most protected air defense networks wasn't an isolated event. It was a preview of what the next stage of this war will look like.